Most people don't feel poor because they're lazy. They feel stuck because something about money has never fully made sense. You work, you earn, you pay, you try, and somehow, progress feels slow. Meanwhile, others seem to move ahead faster. Not always working harder, not always smarter, yet wealth keeps growing around them. For a long time, many of us quietly assumed, maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe I started too late. Maybe I'm just bad with money. But what if the real difference was never effort? What if wealth grows differently depending on how money enters your life? Because the truth is, the rich don't just have more money. They have money structured differently. Welcome to Money with Jerry, a place where you sharpen your edge. Keycap 1: They own assets, not just income. Most people live on income. Salary in, expenses out. Repeat. But wealthy individuals focus on something else entirely. Ownership. Assets are things that pay you even when you're not working. Here's the first quote. The rich don't rely on paychecks. They rely on ownership. And another, income pays bills. Assets build freedom. I once knew two people earning almost the same salary. One upgraded life each year. Better apartment, newer car, nicer things. The other quietly bought a small rental property. Nothing glamorous. In fact, it looked like sacrifice at the time. Years later, the difference was striking. One still needed every paycheck to survive. The other had income arriving even on months they barely worked. Same earnings. Different structure. Wealth doesn't grow from what you earn. It grows from what you own. Keycap 2: Compound growth works in their favor. Compound growth is often explained mathematically. But in real life, it's emotional. Because compounding rewards time, and time feels invisible when you're struggling. Here's the first quote. Money that stays invested grows. Money that's spent resets. Second, compounding quietly rewards those who start before they feel ready. I once spoke to someone who began investing small amounts in their 20s. They often felt it was pointless. Too small to matter. Too slow to notice. Friends around them were spending freely. Traveling. Upgrading. They felt behind. But years later, something shifted. Their investments had grown enough to produce returns larger than their monthly contributions. Money was now making money, not because they were wealthy, but because they gave time something to multiply. Compounding doesn't look powerful early, but later, it changes everything. Keycap 3: They can take bigger risks. Risk feels different depending on your safety net. For many people, one mistake can mean rent stress, debt, instability. So caution becomes survival. But wealth changes risk entirely. Here's the first quote. Risk feels smaller when failure isn't fatal. Second, wealth gives people room to try again. I once met someone who left a stable job to start a business. From the outside, it looked brave, confident, entrepreneurial. What most didn't see. Family financial backing. Living costs covered. No debt pressure. If it failed, they were safe. Compare that to someone supporting relatives, paying loans, managing bills. For them, risk isn't exciting. It's dangerous. So opportunity gaps widen, not from courage alone, but from cushioning. Wealth often grows where falling is survivable. Keycap 4: Debt works for them, not against them. Most people experience debt as pressure. Credit cards, loans, interest draining income. But for the wealthy, debt often functions differently. It's leverage. Here's the first quote. The poor borrow to consume. The rich borrow to acquire. Second, interest paid for assets is different from interest paid for lifestyle. I once watched two people take loans. One financed electronics, furniture, upgrades. Life looked better immediately, but payments lingered for years. The other borrowed to buy a property producing rental income. Their debt created cash flow. One debt extracted money. The other generated it. Same tool, different outcome. Debt isn't inherently wealth-destroying. It depends on what it's attached to. Keycap 5: They own businesses. Employment pays for time. Business pays for systems. And systems scale beyond individual effort. Here's the first quote. Employees earn once. Owners earn repeatedly. Second, A business separates income from hours. I knew someone who worked tirelessly for promotions, long hours, high performance, steady raises. Their income rose, but only when effort rose. Another person built a modest service business. Slow start, uncertain months, learning curve, but over time clients multiplied. Staff joined. Revenue expanded beyond their personal hours. Eventually, income continued even during vacations. One income depended on presence, the other on structure. That's the quiet difference ownership creates. Crescent moon emotional deepening. For many people, learning this later brings mixed feelings. Understanding, but also regret. You look back and think, if I had known, if I had started, if someone had explained, and it's easy to turn that into self-blame. But most people were never taught wealth mechanics. We were taught income mechanics. Work, earn, spend, repeat. Ownership, leverage, compounding, asset strategy, these were rarely part of everyday financial education. So confusion wasn't personal failure. It was informational absence. The rich don't get richer simply because they work harder. Often, their money is positioned differently. Owning instead of only earning. Growing instead of resetting, leveraging instead of consuming, scaling instead of trading time. And maybe the goal isn't to suddenly become wealthy overnight. Maybe it's just this, to see the patterns clearly, because clarity changes how you decide, how you structure, how you begin. If any part of this made something finally click for you, you're not behind. You're seeing what was always operating quietly in the background. And awareness is where change starts. Progress beats perfection. Every single time. If this video has been helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. You may want to watch the video next to this one.